that sold me something on eBay that said, hey, it was a handwritten note from a 12-year-old, that said, thank you very much for your purchase. We appreciate it. And it reminded me of when I was 10 years old, except I didn't have eBay and didn't have all these options to buy singles online. So it was refreshing. So it just shows you kind of all generations.
The hobby's exploding and the happiness is absurd. Dustin, get in here. Let's tell, Dustin, Dustin, how much happiness has getting into collecting Pokemon and flipping Pokemon been for you?
Guys, did you see the game last night, the Mavs-Bucks game? I could have been more fired up to watch, Giannis with the Bucks, and then Porzingis, our guy Luka. I mean, it was unbelievable. Did you see the through the legs pass pick and roll play by the Mavs? And so it was Luka passing to Max Kleber for the dunk. Unbelievable. I mean, just the fact that he decided to make that pass at the end of the game with the game on the line. I mean, this kid, I can't get enough of it. Just unbelievable. So I don't know if you saw that, but the Mavs did pull out the victory against the Bucks. Now for the Bucks, they're already locked in as a playoff favorite in the East. So, I'm not saying that Giannis and those guys didn't play their hearts out, because I believe that they did. But it was just, the Mavs are one of those teams, they're not clutch in the final 5 minutes of the game over the last season. They just have not been. So, to see them kind of pull that out was incredible. I'll be honest with you. I thought the Bucks would pull away. I thought the Bucks would finish it out because the Mavs just have not been a clutch team in the last 5 minutes, but they pulled it out, and it was incredible. So, I don't know if you guys saw that, but I'm excited. I just excited for the playoffs in general. There's some just amazing teams, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So, we'll see what happens. Anyway, hey guys, so, we're talking about card values, etc. Let me show you a few things. For the guys that are about my age, I'm 39. So for the guys that are about my age, check this out. Now, these are not original copies. These are not mine from childhood, okay? I bought these secondhand because I wanted to read these again and just kind of get that feeling, that nostalgic feeling, and I got it, trust me. But let me just show you this. Beckett Basketball Magazine number 4 from September-October 1990. And then, hold on, let's keep going. Issue number 1 from March-April 1990. So I was about to turn 9 years old when this came out, and this is right in the heat of when I was collecting. But what's amazing and what's fantastic is on eBay, you can find these at reasonable prices. This is the first hockey Beckett, issue number 1, September-October 1990. Again, I was 8 years old, almost 9 years old. May-June 1990. I remember when I look at this brings me back to when I was a kid. I mean, and if you open these, I've read these cover to cover because I remember reading the articles as a kid and just thinking man, these guys, they know their stuff. It's incredible to look at. What I would recommend is if you don't have these, buy these. So you can go on eBay. They're inexpensive for the most part. Now, granted, I haven't looked today. I haven't looked a week ago, 2 weeks ago. I bought these a couple of years ago, and they were a couple dollars a copy. I mean, it's not, and I'm not buying this for an investment. By the way, Christian Okoye, the Nigerian Nightmare. Check it out on the back. Awesome. But go out and buy these. If you're a guy like me that's just kind of getting back into this for the nostalgia factor, check these out. I mean, it'll bring you back to that time. It is a really fun place to be. So check it out. Those old Becketts. And they're on eBay, the ones I got. Now, granted, this was a couple years ago, so I don't know what they're going for now. But I still believe they're out there and not very expensive, even if you can get, I wasn't looking to get pristine copies or anything. It was just a matter of finding them to be able to look at them and see that as an adult, and compare it, kind of just get that feeling of, when you're a kid. So check it out, guys. Wanted to make this video in response to questions that I get, and some of this is philosophical. And obviously, we talk about just kind of, pricing and why it is the way that it is and how long will it last, et cetera, et cetera. I also get a lot of questions of, hey, I'm just getting back in. What is my collection worth type thing? And then I'm also want to respond to kind of the, I've heard a lot of statements within the hobby of, if you were throwing a dart at anything in the last, year or so, everything has kind of gone up. And so this video is more for new people that are getting into the hobby, or people like me that are getting back in. I got back in about 2 years ago. And so I feel like this is a really good open discussion to have, because it's not, there's just kind of varying opinions all over the place. And so I want to kind of put this out to viewership as well. If you have any comments on this, I would love to hear them. As you know, I respond to most all comments on the videos. And so, want to make sure that we kind of keep this dialogue open. And of course, this is kind of a moving target. We're in a sports card investing world, collecting world that we have not been in yet. It's definitely a different time. And so, and there's so many variables that contribute to that. So let's go ahead and dig into it. First off, let's tackle the question of how much is my collection worth. And so the first thing that I want to kind of go over is, for those that, like me, that had a bunch of cards from, the late 80s, early 90s, that's considered the junk wax era. Those cards, in large part, have not changed in values. Those cards that were mass produced in the late 80s, early 90s. Now, there are certain, of course, there's exceptions to every rule. You have grading, so you have certain cards that are graded, that have certainly appreciated that weren't graded back then. And so, there's all sorts of variations. There's all sorts of sides to this argument. The 89 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card, it's mass produced, but in a PSA 10 and even PSA 9 values, from what I understand, have risen fairly dramatically over the last 12 months. So with it being an iconic rookie card, even though it was mass produced, demand in the hobby right now being at a high has pushed the price of that card up. And it's people like me that are going back and saying, like, I want that card back. That's a card I had 20 years ago and I want to have it again. I want to have 5 of them. Now I've got some disposable income. I'm 40 or I'm 45 or I'm 50 years old or I'm 35 or whatever it is, and I'm ready to get back into it. You also have younger people that have heard about this card, that hear about their dad talking about it, saying like, man, watching highlights on YouTube of Griffey, like that guy was legit. I'm gonna get 89 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. So there's all sorts of different variables that contribute to that. But as a whole, if you're looking at raw cards from the late 80s, early 90s, they are mostly worthless from a monetary standpoint. They're worth very little. Now, sentimental value is a totally different thing. If you're a collector and you just love those sets and you love those cards, I know of collectors that are collecting very niche players. They might be collecting 87 Donruss Kansas City Royals and PSA 9, let's just say. That's a whole different conversation. Those are, they're buying from a collecting standpoint. Maybe that's a certain time period, a team that means a lot to them, and they're collecting for that reason. So that's totally different. So sentimental value, very different than monetary value. Things can be sentimentally valuable to you that, it could be priceless to you. It could be worth very little to somebody else. And so let's make sure we make that distinction. Vintage cards as well. If we go pre-1980s, if you're, for raw vintage cards, I know folks that are buying and grading those, and I think that if you have a really good eye for that sort of thing, then great. There are added risks of fakes and trimmed cards. Now, you have those same risks with modern cards as well, but you certainly have a risk of that with vintage cards. There's a lot of vintage cards that have been restored or tampered with. They've been altered. And so that's just something when you're looking at buying raw vintage, I feel like it's already tough enough to buy raw modern cards, just getting kind of the condition right when you're looking at a picture on eBay or on ComC. Vintage is a whole nother ball game, and I feel like if you're a newcomer into the market and you're thinking like, I'm going to get into raw vintage cards, that's tough. I mean, I would say for me, I want to have graded vintage cards just for that reason, that I'm not going to be able to figure out what a fake looks like. look, there's people that are very, very good at making fakes. They're very, very good, at trimming. And, so the trimming thing is a concern for me, especially with vintage. It happens in modern too. So I'm not going to say it doesn't happen in modern cards, but unfortunately, when there is money to be made, it brings bad actors in, and that's why I think there's such a push for graded cards, because the idea is that it gets rid of those those trim cards or those altered cards. It weeds them out. So when we're talking about just raw cards in general, but especially vintage cards, those can be tricky as far as evaluating a card online and trying to figure out exactly what that is worth. All right, so that's the questions I get about what is my collection worth from the late 80s, early 90s. In many, many cases, those cards monetarily are not worth very much, and they still are not. Even though we're in a high demand sports card market, most of those cards still are not. There are exceptions to that rule. There are many exceptions to that rule, but it's specific players within baseball, basketball, and football that you would have to target that to where you've seen appreciation. So keep that in mind. And the reason why I say that is because there's newcomers that come in, they have X amount of dollars to work with, and so when you go out there and there's a zillion cards on eBay to choose from, and so it can be very easy to just think about, and I guess too when you're going through this exercise, think about too, is it a card that you're buying because you want it as a collector, or is it something that you are looking to buy and then sell in 3 months or 6 months or a year or in 5 years? Because that's a totally different mindset for me. I bought some action-packed Brett Favre rookie cards, and there's a part of me that's like, well, those could be worth something, but honestly, those are just cards that if I never sell them, I'm perfectly okay with that, just because that was a card as a kid that I loved. It brings back a memory for me when I look at that card, and so that's just a happy moment for me when I look at that card. So it really depends on your mindset when you're looking. So if you're coming back into the hobby or you're a newcomer, keep those things in mind, because it's very easy when you're on eBay to be looking at a card and be like, oh, I think that card, you're specifically looking at a card, to flip it, for example, down the line because you like the player and you think it could have some movement. But then you'll get sidetracked onto a card that you had as a kid, or a card that you just think looks really cool, and then you're buying it now, and then you realize, oh, I just spent all my money. The other piece of this as well is, I think when we look at, if you look at an index of football cards or basketball cards that have risen, and we're talking about modern cards now, there are a few players that are driving that graph upward. So, if you're looking at football cards, for example, over the last 12 months, I'm just going to use a couple of examples. These aren't the only guys that have pushed pricing up for modern cards, but I was buying and selling during this past season, and I can tell you the two guys that stick out to me that shot up in value considerably are Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. I bought a PSA 9 Patrick Mahomes Silver Prism, 2017 Silver Prism. It was graded PSA 9. I bought two of those for $142 each in August of 2019. Sadly, I sold those away as they rose. I actually sold them after they won the Super Bowl, because I was thinking like, okay, well, this is going to be kind of like not the peak, but I felt like this is a good time to sell. It's kind of a high moment. I was wrong. That was not the high moment, but again, no regrets with it. But it just shows you just how dramatically Pat Mahomes stuff went up over the last 12 months. Not even 12 months. Well, I guess about 12 months now. And Lamar Jackson would be the other guy. So we got Pat Mahomes and Lamar Jackson cards that absolutely went like this on the graph. Now, maybe they've retreated back some now. I haven't been paying as much attention to those two guys. A little bit, but not their rookie cards over the last couple of months. But those two guys, if you're looking at an index, they went like this. Their pricing went way up. But that's not what happened to the entire market. There's a lot of players that don't get a lot of hobby love. Defensive players don't get a lot of hobby love. Skill players don't in football. Wide receivers, running backs, and so that's something I'm very interested in seeing with the market because it's gotten even more hot over the last 6 months. I'm very interested to see if football does kind of what basketball did and and really trends up, because football cards compared to baseball and basketball really haven't gone up near as much. So curious to see what happens this season with that. But my point is that you have a handful of players that are really driving that market up, and then you've got other players that are kind of steadily driving it up as well. And then you have a lot of players that haven't had any movement or have gone down. I've got Ryan Finley and Will Greer rookie cards that have not gone up. They haven't. I think they've actually gone down in value since I got them a year ago. So it's not, everything is not going up. It's not as easy as just throwing a dart at a board. There are specific sets that appreciate a lot more, that have appreciated a lot more than other sets. So it's not as, it's, when I hear everything has been going up to some degree, yes, and for certain players, yes, but for the majority of the market, that's not really the case. There's a lot of baseball prospects, and for the baseball card collectors that are watching this as well, please chime in, because baseball is less of my focus. But historically, I know that people like to buy into baseball prospects because it's fun. But 9 out of 10 baseball prospects don't pan out. And it's really kind of similar to, I know NBA cards are hot, NBA rookies, 9 out of 10 of those guys aren't going to be, Steph Curry and LeBron James. It's probably 9.9 out of 10. If you look at the guys that are going to have a Hall of Fame career, it's a small fraction of the players in the league. So, we're speculating, we're prospecting if you're buying any sort of rookie. And so, I think that's why, a lot of folks, and you've seen, I think this is part of the reason why LeBron James prices are so high, is he is kind of that steadfast, he's thought of as, if I put my money into this player's career, it's safe. It's fairly safe. The guy's accomplished. He's already won championships. He's in the GOAT conversation. Outside of MJ and Kobe, I mean, he's kind of that guy that where it's like, hey, I feel comfortable putting thousands of dollars into that player because he's fairly safe. And so I think that's why his prices are considerably higher than a lot of the other players. So for all the newcomers in, thank you very much for joining the hobby. I think it's a really, really exciting time. And pricing going up is not, a function of, it's not really a surprise. It's supply and demand. I mean, over the last 8 years since Prism started and Select, I mean, just talking about basketball cards, if you're looking at 2016 Optic, 2012 Prism and Select, just using those as examples, Mosaic, you could throw those in as well. The print runs have not been very high at all. I mean, sports cards in general were not very popular between 2012 and 2017. And so if you're looking at players in that, and I think that's part of the reason why, if you look at a guy like Giannis, pop reports are low, because they weren't printing. They just weren't printing as much because sports cards as a whole were not popular between 2012 and 2017 on a mass scale. And I think we're still not quite there yet. Demand has certainly shot up, but I think that there is an argument to the fact that, look, it's still not the junk wax era when every kid in my neighborhood had cards. It's not there yet. I don't know if it'll ever get there, but it doesn't really need to, because they aren't printing they're not printing near as much as they were back then. I know there's more sets, and I know there's different parallels, but the other thing that has to be remembered is not every set is being focused on by collectors and investors. There's, in basketball, the ones that are at the top are Prism, Mosaic, and Optic, and then you also have Select that's in there. So really, you're talking about 4 sets. I mean, there are people, now you have boxes of Chronicles that are going for $1 zillion, but historically that has not been the case. So it'll be really interesting to see kind of how this plays out. What are you guys' thoughts? I know this is kind of an open-ended conversation that a lot of folks are having, but obviously not every card is going up. That's not the case at all. It's specific players that have really kind of shot up, and I think that there's certain rookies that have shot up as well. There are some rookies, their prices are very high based off of just what is expected of them to do. It's prospecting, so there's a lot of hype around prospects, and so I understand why kind of those prices are up. But just like with anything else, a lot of those prospects are not going to work out. They're not going to have Hall of Fame careers. So will there be ups and downs? Absolutely, because some of those guys are not going to pan out. So what we will see, as far as when we talk about the bubble, when does the bubble burst and all that, it's probably kind of, it's not, I don't know if it's necessarily the bubble bursting all at once, But I think that you kind of see it ebb and flow like a normal market, because you're going to have certain guys that get injured. There might be, some of these rookies that have, unfortunately, a career-ending injury or an injury that impacts them to where they're just not the same player. Those cards I don't expect those cards to hold value if they're, if they've shot up and that happens to a player. I don't expect them to hold value. Maybe they will. Maybe demand is high enough, for that to happen. I just don't see it. So anyway, guys, what are your thoughts? I really enjoy having this conversation with other collectors. And thank you very, very much for tuning in. We now have more than 180 videos in the catalog of sports card investing, collectibles investing, personal finance, all tied together. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and we will see you again next time. Thanks, guys.